What's up? It's Andrew from The Shreds. We just got back from touring the West Coast a few weeks ago, and today I'm gonna break down the costs of touring for small bands. If you want to see me just talking about how tour went with some videos and footage, jump ahead to the chapters linked in the description. Let's start with a common myth about touring that I've heard talked about over and over. I am sure much bigger bands than us get some kind of support from their label. We get none in the form of money, and neither do bands that I'm friends with that are just a lot bigger than us. But Relapse has done wonders for us in the form of contacts or prestige that allows us to even go on tour, which is kind of unquantifiable. I remember reading in an interview that the reason that Exhumed made their gore metal re-recording is that their van broke down on tour. Relapse loaned them money to get it fixed, and they did that album so that they could pay Relapse back for it. From my perspective, I would have just put it on my card to get it fixed, but I have the luxury of a high-paying, white-collar job and very few personal expenses. I should also note that Rip to Shreds is not in any way a professional band, and we're not interested in being one. When I was shopping around our third album to labels, a couple of them asked me, "Are you guys going to make a career out of music?" And I said, "No." And the labels would say, "Well, we want bands that are trying to go pro." Fair enough. When Relapse signed us, I told them, we'll go out on tour 2 or 3 weeks a year, and we'll do everything we can to promote these albums, but we have no interest in being professional or going full-time. And they were cool with that, so that's why we signed with Relapse. And that's like part of the reason why RTS hasn't done any support tours yet, and a major reason why we'll never go on big package laminate lanyard type tours. I only want to go on tours with bands that I'm personally friends with, or bands that I personally really enjoy their music. So I've been friends with Derek and Salhin for a really long time. I love Mixamon Brain Corrosion. I love Fetus Slicer and Auhen. Mike and I have known Dave from Nucleus for ages, and his band's sick. And I've been like a Bruce Campbell fan for like 10 years before I even met anyone in that band. Live Burial was the only one I didn't know before the tour. We didn't really get to pick our touring partner at that time because it was our first tour ever, and it was also in Europe. But they turned out to be cool dudes who played cool music, so we were kind of lucky there. But basically, I have no interest in trying to curry favor with big-time booking agents so I can tour with a popular band that I actually like. I've got lots of friends who do just that, and they want to make a career out of their music, so it makes sense for them. And they're willing to make the sacrifice of touring with bands that they don't enjoy their music. But for me, with my limited amount of time off a year, I don't want to spend that small amount of time supporting like Veil of Maya or Chelsea Grin just so I can have enough brownie points in 2 or 3 years so our agent can put us on tour with like Cannibal Corpse or Suffocation on a 10-band package, build second or third bottom. That sounds like an absolutely miserable way to do music for me, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I will never go full-time.
And it's not just about like deathcore bands, because I'd be over the moon to support Waking the Cadaver on tour because they're sick. I wouldn't want to play with cool underground bands that I'm supposed to like or Drag Car.
This is to give you an idea of the mindset that we're going into touring with. So let's look at our costs. So the tour is 10 days, spending $4,000 for 2 session musicians, $3,000 on the van, including insurance, $500 the booking agent's commission. That's paid once we actually get paid by all the shows. $500 for 2 hotel stays, $1,000 for gas, and $1,000 for food for 4 dudes, which comes out to $10,000 total. On the income side, we've got $4,500 in show money. This includes 2 bands from Sacramento onwards. There's a 70-30 split for RTS with the support bands, and Bruce Campbell was paid $500 for their shows. We also have $6,500 in merch sales for $11,000 total. For the van, we got it from Bandigo. Enterprise looks cheaper online, but, it doesn't actually have any options for insurance until you go pick it up in person, and then it's like pretty much the same price. I have had many friends who advised me against going with Enterprise because they've been canceled on randomly right before their tour started. The base price looks like it's only about $1,200 or $1,300 for 10 days. But you cannot skimp on insurance, and this will easily add more than $100 a day. How many GoFundMes have you seen in the last few years where people either got into a catastrophic accident and they had these insane medical bills, or they had all their gear stolen? And then that doesn't even factor in when you're super tired and you have any kind of accident, or you bump into someone else's car or smack into a building while parking, which has happened all the time. And insurance will cover that. But if you don't, then you're suddenly on the hook for thousands, potentially tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. If you're not willing to shell out for that insurance, you probably should not be getting in that van and going on tour, because you're gambling with the rest of your life. So renting a friend's or another band's van can be significantly cheaper, but you also run into problems like how often do they maintain their van, what kind of insurance will you be covered by, and if it breaks down, where are you going to get another van? Bandigo, we can just call them up and say, hey, our van broke down, we need a new van, and they'll hook us up. So taking that into account, if we had blistering rot along, right, with a second band to split the van cost, that would be like $2,000 or so in like rental fees and gas. But then the show money would have been cut by a third, and we would not have sold any HGT merch. So let's just call it a wash there. Mike and I get a split $1,000 for this tour. Obviously, this tour was particularly expensive for the band because Ryan and Brian couldn't go. We had to find a very last minute, out-of-state professional drummer because our backup drummer had an emergency and he couldn't go. That also jacked the costs up. But if we had done the tour as a normal full band, we would have ended up with about $5,000 for the tour, or $500 a day to split between 4 people. Some additional things that we would absolutely love to bring on future tours: a driver, our own front of house dude, and a merch person. Because these 3 things are all things that would allow the band to put on the best performance possible. Dedicated driver means everyone's more rested, and overnight drives, if you have like really shitty routing and you have to drive 16 hours to make it to the next venue, is a lot less onerous. Now, obviously, just drive yourself. That's the first thing that you skip out on. For front of house, a good front of house is going to be like $350 a day minimum, which basically leaves us with almost nothing to work with. We have a entirely self-contained IEM rig with direct outs from our HX stomps and bass pedals, so we're not dependent on the in-house FOH for anything. But it still needs to sound good out in the audience. When you deal with local front of house, they understand the room, they understand where it feeds back, they know how echoey or dead the room is and all that, but they don't know the arrangement of your songs, and occasionally they don't even know the genre that you're playing. When we were in Germany, one of the shows, as soon as we rolled up, the first thing out of the promoter's mouth was, the sound guy tonight hates rock music. But like, even beyond simply knowing what death metal is supposed to sound like, a touring front of house knows what your band wants to sound like. Because there's so many different kinds of death metal, from super clean tech death like Faceless, to cavernous verbed out bands like Spectral Voice, to noisy punky bands like Nunslaughter, to really dumb bands like us that have special needs because we use HM2s. And every single band is going to have like a particular way that they want their music to be presented to the audience that is going to be really hard to accurately communicate to the local front of house in 10 minutes every single night, every night for 10 plus nights in a row. And, we get into arrangement. Who's playing a guitar solo that needs to be faded up? How hard does the drummer hit? Do their feet get tired the longer they blast or the more double bass they do? So you have to ride the kick fader to make sure it sounds even. When can you mute extra vocal mics, etc.? When I toured with Mixoma as HGT, at the Los Angeles festival we played, I took over the FOH so I could ride the kick fader for Derek. Because when he does his 1 foot blast, it's like 300 BPM. But he's feathering the kick drum instead of like doing like a full power stroke. And like on the other shows of that tour, the other front of house engineers had no idea how to do it, except for the guy at Cafe Colonial, because Anthony is a crazy front of house dude, and mix must sounded insane when he mixed it. Bands that are too cool for school would like you to believe that if you're just good enough, you show up and you play and you sound awesome, right? The sound guy's a moron. You just turn your amp up all the way, but that's purely fantasy. Every night, the front of house is what determines if the crowd thinks you guys sound good or sound awful. This is something I would really, really like to have, especially with how stupid HM2s are, but it's obviously the most expensive on a day-to-day basis and most out of reach. And the last thing that we would really like to have is a dedicated merch person. This kind of goes back to how much energy the band has to give on stage and how much rest they have. I lost my voice on like the Europe and the East Coast tour because, you know, I'm running merch. I have to like talk over the sound of the other bands playing. I'm not even necessarily blowing out my voice on stage. I managed to avoid that the West Coast tour, which was really fucking sick. It also frees up the band from not like needing to speed off to the merch booth as soon as your set is over. It just makes everything a lot easier. And beyond that, upselling people on merch is a skill that you need to learn and develop, same as playing guitar, writing songs, doing recording or mixing and all that. It's its own skill. I think bigger bands have merch people who kind of act also as like managers who will keep track of inventory and what designs sell in what cities, and they'll take care of like actual ordering of merch and where you're going to restock on like long routing. But that's, I think, at a much higher level band than we would really ever be. If you've ever worked in the service industry, you know conventionally attractive people, whether masculine or feminine presenting, sell more and get tipped more. I am grumpy and ugly as fuck. You don't want me behind the merch table. So this is like the most crucial one, and on the next US tour, we absolutely will have a merch person with us. How much do we want to take home per person per day for a tour? For us and for most bands, it's less about want and more about what can you do to make it sustainable. You know, if you live in a cheap ass area, or if you get paid time off, you can make do with less. If you live in a major city, or you need to quit your job to go on tour, or you have a family and kids and bills to pay, you know, there's a bare minimum that you need to survive on when you go back home. Other considerations: finding a place to sleep on tour is huge. We were lucky enough to be able to crash with Bruce Campbell for the first 2 days. We stayed at my place in San Jose on the third day, and then we crashed with acquaintances every night from Sacramento until Vancouver. It would cost us at least $100 a day or more, depending on availability and if we are willing to sleep in infested roach motels, which I am not. And you should not either, because that's just disgusting. This is one very obvious part of touring where bands are entirely dependent on the generosity of strangers. And when you're crashing, 3 things: inflatable mattresses, yoga mats, and sleeping bags. As long as I can have a bag and a mat, and I'm happy to sleep on whatever floor. Showering. Being sticky is gross. Being stinky will make your bandmates mad, and fans will give you weird looks. The Terrorfest venue had a shower. Most venues don't. I remember last year, the Montreal venue had a shower, and a couple of the European ones had one. You don't necessarily have clean towels on tour either. I provided towels for bands when they stay here with me, but that's often not the case. Food. If you're a band with a restrictive diet, being vegetarian or vegan or kosher or halal or whatever, it can be a struggle on tour. I guess you have to be on the lookout for Taco Bell because they have good fast food vegan options. I'm old. I do not want to eat bologna or peanut butter sandwiches every night for 2 weeks in a row on tour just to savor cash buyouts. I want to eat something hot and be comfortable. So really, when you go on tour, you need 4 or more people willing to eat shit and live goblin mode for 2 to 6 weeks just so you can sell some fucking t-shirts and play some music. That's really what tour is all about. Okay, here's some cool shit from the tour. I didn't have energy or time to make video of everything like I did for Europe. I was driving, tour managing, I had to pull double sets for the second half. I will have video for Obscene Extreme and for Japan though. Day 1, we got our butts down to Los Angeles. Arturo came out to shoot the show, better known as the legend Sex Thrash 69. show after like an earlier sold out show by, I think it was like some kind of girls rock band. I'm not sure, but like it was packed for that show. So many teeny boppers and their parents there, and it was pretty crazy. We got about 40 people with the sold out Wormrod show down the street. We spent the night with Juan from Bruce Campbell, and we got to hang out with some of the Arismenda dudes. Day 2, down to San Diego. Brick by Brick, very cool venue, very nice stage. Turnout was, but we played pretty good, I think. The opening band, Scour, I actually played with them before on the HGT and Mixima tour 2 years ago. After this, we just drive back to Long Beach to stay with Juan. Day 3, Palmdale. None of us had even heard of Palmdale before the tour. John Wayne is from this town, I guess. Small place, about 2 hours from Long Beach. It's not like a major market, but the venue, Transplants Brewery, is trying to turn it into like a cool tour stop along the way from Los Angeles to SF because it's kind of just like a dead-ass part of any tour routing. Venue was super nice, huge stage. The seated tables were a little weird, but whatever. Vulgar Display of Gaming came out to do a live stream event and shoot it.
Fuck yeah.
We spent the night at a hotel here because I have no homies in Palmdale. Who even lives in Palmdale? Day 4, San Luis Obispo. So Humdinger Brewery is actually less than a block from Matt Harvey's print shop. So I went over to shoot that Death episode with him. One of the dudes from the opening bands was like selling some bootleg shit. I copped this really cool Discharge hat. Tiny stage. I love playing tiny shows. Small PA on stands punched way above its weight in like what was basically a concrete box. Bruce Campbell sounded really great in there. So SLO is like 3 hours from San Jose. So after the show, we just got in the van, drove back to my place, got there at like 2:30 or something. So Kenji and Mike were just like, we're going to go home and sleep in our own beds and come get us tomorrow. Day 5, Sacramento. So I go to the East Bay to pick up Mike and Kenji, and we get stuck in traffic. This is the first really shitty traffic of the tour. Cafe Colonial is a very fun little room with great sound. We have the same front of house as the HGT and Mixima tour, so I knew we were going to sound good. I kind of wanted to conserve energy because this was going to be like the first double set I had to do of the tour. But once I was on the stage, the crowd was like high energy. So I was like, fuck it, let's go. And then I ended up very stiff and low energy on the RTS set. We stayed with the guys from Wretched Earth Productions. We got a shower, which is amazing, and a real comfy sleep on some couches. Day 6 is Eureka. So this is like the first really long drive through a ton of woody areas. Savage Henry's it's like a comedy club. It's pretty echoey, pretty reverby. It's an extremely small town, but we still got about 30 people to show up on a Wednesday night, even though like Wormrot had just come through like 2 days earlier. Promoter also brought us an absolute shitload of tacos, which were very good. And that night we slept on the stage, which the owner swore was haunted.
This is the venue. We're actually on the stage right now. He's
There ain't no such thing as ghosts.
So we're all kind of, well, he's freaked out because the venue owner is like, dude, this place is haunted.
I'm not
and there's
freaked out. There's no such thing as ghosts.
And there's apparently ghosts here. Apparently there's a ghost in the ADA bath. There's a ghost in the ADA bathroom. The ghost that goes up those stairs and runs downstairs. And there's a ghost at the bar, apparently. So, we'll see.
Day 7, Portland, competing with Wormrot again, who have a sold-out show down the street. And also across town, Necrogoblicon was playing with Revocation and Brat at a bigger theater. So around 40 people showed up for this again, along with some friends I haven't seen in a very long time. I was very touched. They came to our show instead of going to Wormrot. I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? You should be at, it's their first fucking tour on American soil in 10 years. You should be there. But they came out to my show instead. Jake from Mare Cognitum came on stage to sing Bodies with us. We stayed with a buddy I had met a few weeks prior. He actually drove the Korean hardcore punk band Slant on tour, and they all crashed at my place. Day 8, Vancouver. This night had no HGT. Contusion was our support. That's members of Mammoth Grinder and the drummer from Repulsion. We were originally supposed to tour with them, but their schedules got changed around, so they were on tour the week after ours finished. No competing shows, so we got 140 people to show up. We had sold most of our merch yesterday, which was, a bummer because people wanted the vinyl and the tour shirts. Not for nothing, the city is known as Vancouver because a ton of Chinese fans showed up. One very nice lady brought us Cao Cao Bao. Great show. Very enjoyable. We drove back across the border to Bellingham and we tried to find a random ass hotel at 3 in the morning. Apparently there was like some fucking athletics meet. So we had to drive pretty far to find a hotel that had vacancies. Day 9, Northwest Terror Fest. I was really bummed about not being able to sneak out of our own shows to go catch Wormrot. And Wormrot played on fucking Friday. But there was still Demolition Hammer and Witch Vomit to enjoy on Saturday. So Rip to Shreds has played Terror Fest before, back in 22. But we were on the small stage, downstairs. And this year, we were on the big stage, right after Falls of Rhoros. The crowd was amazing. I got to see a lot of friends I hadn't seen in over a year, and then it's time to hit the downstairs stage to play the HGT set. Our buddy Lawrence, who actually played bass on the RTS tour the previous year on the East Coast, was also attending. He was supposed to fly back on Sunday, but he was like, fuck it, hop in the van and drive down with you guys back to the Bay. It was super cool. So we just piled into his Airbnb for the night, which was really hot and sweaty because it was meant for one dude. Day 10, Eugene, last day. Very nice venue. The promoter bought us pizza from this pizzeria across the road. It was great. It was a small crowd, but I could see that like some dudes were super into it while I was playing, which was very awesome. Jason drove his own van down to Eugene from Portland, so he could just load in his drums and go home. The rest of us were like, we just want to go home now. We don't want to sleep here. So I drove about 4 hours through the mountains before I was going to pass out. Then Kenji slammed the Red Bull and drove the remaining 5 hours through torrential rains till we got home around like 10 a.m. The band comes home with a little money in our pocket and a bunch of new fans. It's definitely a little bit of a bummer that we have to compete with the crowded market, because I felt like we were capable of pulling bigger crowds like we did in Vancouver. And I want everyone who comes to our shows to feel like they're having as much fun as possible with the sickest crowd possible. And I don't want them to feel like they're missing out on, another cool show that's down the block, or they have to scrape up $10 so they can support, the umpteenth touring band that's come through their tiny town in a week. So I want to do the West Coast over again as soon as we can during like a slower season. Other things, obviously dedicated merch person. We had 3 merch designs. I want to have at least 4 next time. We sold through our patches super quickly, so I want to have more patches and also more patch designs, so it's not just only the logo. And avoid any last minute lineup changes, whether it's with our band members or our touring partners. But on the whole, I was very pleased with the tour, especially given it's our first time touring the West Coast, and it's the 3rd tour that the band has done in the life of the band. That's all for today. I hope to see you guys soon. The next show we play. Peace.